This is the More to Life Than Money podcast. Real people, real stories, real conversations about wealth and abundance with your host, J.W. Rayhons.
Welcome, everybody. It is an outstanding day for us to be able to have a conversation. The lady that we get to visit with today is just, if you saw, which you could do actually, you could look her up and you'd see just a list of pages of accomplishments and achievements and generosity and significant just success that you've been able to experience in your life, Adelaida. And I think it's just going to be a privilege. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for us to just have a conversation and really get to know you as a person, even more than these lists of accomplishments that you've been able to experience in your life. And what's fun about this is you and I do this on a fairly regular basis. Just this time there's some microphones in front of us.
I know.
And so
instead of
there's
pancakes.
there's no pancakes and we don't have any old fashioned, for us to drink here this afternoon. But that's what I think is going to be fun about this, is just give people insight to some of the conversations that you and I have had, because we feed off of each other and we fuel each other and we inspire one another. And so I figured, why not just bring that into a conversation where others can be inspired by that as well. And that's really what we're going to do today. And so I'm excited for all of you to get some insight into Adelaida Severson. And here's a lady and a business owner who runs a multi-million-dollar business. And you come from a community in Hawaii, and yet there's like the path from childhood in Hawaii to where you are today, I think is just going to be fascinating for people to hear some nuggets and pieces of what that's looked like along the way. So
and they're probably going to be like, why did you even leave Hawaii to be in the desert?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
They may think that. They may think that. So let's just start there. So when you think about, and by the way, the great things that I've always seen in you, and I thank you so much for our friendship. I thank you so much for the relationship and the special friendship that we get to have, and just seeing more than your leadership, more than your business, but just, the way you give, the way you serve, the way you contribute, the example that you set. And by the way, we are going to talk about your F words, because you drop some F bombs from time to time, and these are like good F bombs. And so we're going to get there. We're going to get there. So
for sure.
So don't give them that just yet. I'm going to bring that one back up.
Okay.
But walk us through that a little bit. What was it like growing up in Hawaii, and maybe how did that influence, or how did that help get you where you are today? And give us some highlight version of all of that.
Well, first of all, JW, thanks so much for having me. I just love our conversations, and to bring it to the rest of the world might be a little scary, but, kind of fun at the same time. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I did. I was born and raised in Hawaii, on Oahu. I grew up in a town called Pearl City, which is, if you've heard of Pearl Harbor, it's kind of in that area, sort of north of that. Super idyllic life, right? You're growing up in Hawaii. It's sunny every day, maybe rain. We call it liquid sunshine. When you're at school and there's a big tsunami coming, instead of having a snow day, we have tsunami day. And that's when everybody runs to the beach because the waves are high. You're like, gotta catch those waves. But honestly, grew up in a pretty humble, family. We were, so my background is Filipino, Hawaiian, Chinese, and Spanish, and growing up in a Catholic upbringing, right? So that was kind of the basis of my foundation. You always were in Hawaii. We have a word called, it's kind of weird, called tantaran. Okay. And that's meaning like if you are, acting like you're above everybody, then people will quickly bring you down to the level, right? So it's sort of that humbling kind of thing. So if you do well in school, and it's almost like you kind of want to hide it because you don't want people to know that you did well. It's really sad in a way, but it's kind of, that's kind of how we are.
Get it.
And so growing up in that, and just, again, the humble beginnings, I have an older brother who's the oldest, my sister, and then me. So I'm the youngest. I was the only one that really went away and left the islands to go to college. That experience was also kind of interesting because, coming from the islands. I'm going to bring up the word ohana, family, everybody who takes care of each other. You respect your elders. You always give back to the community that gave to you. So that was kind of, the background that I grew up in and carried with me. So as I'm going to the University of Southern California, which was USC and University of Spoiled Children, and, it's got that sort of perception. And it was really eye-opening because for me, I wasn't used to that, right? People asking you, what kind of car do you drive? What do your parents do? And I'm like, wow, I don't know.
It's a bit forward, isn't it?
And so, but, you kind of get through that. And I think being able to keep that foundation with me of being that sort of humble, keeping low key but really striving to do your best, because in my family, I don't want to say failure was not an option, but, you're expected to do well. It's that Asian kind of background of doing well. You played the piano and you had to do really well. I played the oboe. I don't know if I ever told you that, but I was in the band.
This is great. I'm getting new information too.
I know, right?
So I hope all of you are catching this. This is a very special moment right now.
It's really sad, right? It's like band geek, and all this, but in Hawaii, everybody is always super friendly too, right? And so there's that trust and, coming to the mainland, is really the friendly person, was a nice person. And in some ways you could get taken advantage of, right? It was like, she's nice. We can, so you have to learn to be nice, but also steely, and just making sure you knew how to navigate that. Yeah. But so that's kind of my beginnings,
well, and even as I listen to you share some of those things, it's interesting because as you're talking about them, these are like childhood foundational things or values that kind of were just placed within you. And yet I can share with confidence and certainty, those still show up in you in so many different ways. Because humble is actually one of the words that I use to describe you often. If people have asked me about you, I say she's one of the most humble people you'll meet. And it's not just because you've experienced success in these different areas and you don't necessarily talk about it. That's not necessarily what I mean when I think of humble in you. It's more in like your thankfulness for the life you get to live. And therefore that gratitude pours over into generosity. And that's what I envision when I speak of you as being humble. And so here, hearing about just the culture of Hawaii and then experiencing something very different when you got to USC, and now all of a sudden realizing there's almost a protection aspect I need to have as well. So how do I still excel, drive for excellence, while not talking about it because my family will put me back in my place. Right. And at the same time, I've got all these people around me that could take advantage of me if I appear too nice. And so how does that then help shape the next phase of your life after that? And what did that phase of life look like? So then, it's all about authenticity, right? And being genuine, but still keeping your guard up, which was really hard for me. So I went into broadcast journalism. That was what my major was. And of course, you got to be steely. You got to be, get the story, right? And get people to talk to you. So there's somewhat of a trust factor. And then you've got to cajole people and, try to get them to tell you their story. And interestingly, because I had maybe that background that I came from, maybe people felt like it was easy to tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, open up, right? Open up. Because I wasn't, it wasn't like, well, tell me there's different ways you could ask the question. Certainly.
And so I did that for a while, I was I reported, for different networks. And then it got to the point where, again, I think sort of that niceness, because I was writing the stories, editing and doing everything for the people reading them. That was my goal, right? To eventually get on camera and be an anchor person and be the next, back then it was Connie Chung, but, but I wasn't, because back then my look wasn't what got the ratings or was, I don't know, accepted. And really? Interestingly, back in the day, it was the 80s and stuff, that news directors had no problem telling you your nose is too big, you're not blonde and blue-eyed, because that was what was selling in the ratings. But going to journalism school, they kind of warn you about that. They're like, it's kind of you got to be tough.
Okay.
People are going to tell you don't look the part. You're not going to, really make it. Only the real tough people make it, And so I have a girlfriend who she and I made a pact that we'd never change anything about our appearance, whether it be like, plastic surgery or whatever. Well, she broke our pact and she went farther than I did. And so, and we're still friends, love her to death. But it was one of those things where you're like, wow, okay, maybe that's the way to do it. But I just remember sitting in front of a burning building, and the deal was in broadcasting, you are first one to get the story. You're there first, you get the story first, and you get amazing B-roll, right?
Okay.
So I had all of the above. I was there first. It was a burning building, unfortunately, but it was pretty good B-roll that, would sell on TV. And I remember sitting in the car writing what I was going to say, and that's all I cared about. And I thought, wow, I had this epiphany, like, what is my purpose in life?
Wow.
People are dying in that building, and here I was just caring about telling the story. So that was kind of an epiphany at that moment. And then interesting, about like a week later, as if serendipity, happened, a friend of mine who was also a graduate of USC was starting his own company in the satellite communications business, something I knew nothing about, right? But as a journalist, you're kind of a quick read. And he said, you were an international relations major, you know the business. How about taking a leap of faith and joining my company? And I think I was at that moment going, there's more money. I'm not going to be in front of the camera anyway. So, and that was when, I started my satellite communications career, which was crazy amazing. Travel, a lot of that. And so
I want to highlight something, and then we're going to come right to it, because there's a moment that you talked about right there where you're sitting in your car and you have almost what I sensed just in this conversation was this moment where it was like there was this disalignment between who you knew you were and what you were doing sitting in that car. Almost like if I draw the connection to the way you described your childhood, then you're sitting in the car with a burning building behind you with people in it, and you're trying to get the story.
Right.
Having this moment where you're like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That was exactly it. And
so, please. So bring us back into that moment for just a second. Like what were you feeling in that moment when you're trying to get the story and you're like, what is this?
Mm-hmm. And I think too, when you're in that mode, right, of fight or flight, you're in competition with the other reporters. It was kind of a moment where I'm like, is this my life now? Like, what's my purpose? Wow. What is my true purpose? Mm-hmm. And JW, you know me, my faith is really important, Catholic upbringing and all of that. So all of that was kind of being brought in because I'm like, well, eventually I want to have kids. I want to be married. And, this job is not going to get me there. But, so all kinds of things were flooding in at that time. And I was getting paid okay, but not as much as my male peers were. All of that stuff was starting to come into the foray of why I was thinking about all of this. And I was all of 20 something,
Yeah.
And so it was kind of at that moment going, honestly, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And I think I might have been thinking about it for a while, but it just kind of hit at that moment in time when I just saw people, cats jumping out of the bed, you know what I mean? And people.
So I'll use this word stirring. It almost sounds like there was some of this that was kind of stirring within you, but there was like a moment that it was like, wait, okay, something's got to change. And so that starts to lead you in another direction, right? Because you're having this moment in the car, which you've highlighted, but as you acknowledge, like there's some other things stirring. I mean, it's all about rankings and image and what you look like, and that seems to be what matters. But internally, whether you realize it or not, I'm almost getting the sense like your subconscious was going, that's not what it's about.
And that's not me.
Yeah. And that's, exactly. And that's not me. You mentioned authenticity, right? That's not me. Mm-hmm. And so this friend comes to you and says, what about satellite communications? Okay, so
and I'm like,
this takes us into a new phase,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
and I'm like,
where do we go now?
Like, what is that? What does that mean? And in the 80s, satellite communications was just burgeoning, just coming to the fore. And at the time, and I don't know if you remember, like when they had, it was a form of QVC. So it was like 24 hours sale.
That's right.
It was called the Carnival of Values, kind of cheesy. Anyway, so the company had the antennas and, the equipment to run all of that. And so they were kind of going into different avenues of sports and live, fights, in Vegas and, encrypting those kinds of things, which now kind of like UFC fights and things like that, right? Pay-per-view. HBO, we had something called Comic Relief, Live Aid, where they had, music all over the world all at once and everybody could watch it at the same time. So it's fascinating to me, but I knew nothing about it. And basically my job was to organize all of that.
Okay.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
And I just, what's funny is there was an event that we did and it really kind of touched there are different countries involved. And, we were doing a test and if you remember Big Bird, right? From, Sesame Street.
Yeah.
And so Big Bird was on there and he was doing something and then all of a sudden all the lights in the on the phone started lighting up, and this was just a test, right? And they're like, you can't have Big Bird on there, for Muslim countries. They don't believe in animated animals and all this stuff. So there's a whole new world that I knew nothing about, right? So it was also cultural, especially if you're going to international, right? So I was like really fascinated by that. And that's when I was like, this is kind of cool, and so it really kind of went from there behind the scenes doing a lot of the broadcast network type events all around the world, whether it be sports, big news events, the Olympics, things like that just really kind of piqued my interest then.
Yeah. So let's get this straight. You decide you're going to go into an area you know nothing about. And you're supposed to run and organize the thing.
Right. I know, right? So there's skills that need to come in.
Yeah. But you go after it anyway. So somewhere along the way, because now obviously you've owned your own company in satellite communications for some time, you get married somewhere along the way and start having kids and a family along the way. And so how do you do it? Like, how do you be wife and mom and small children and run a business and be involved in your community and still somehow enjoy this whole thing?
I know.
Like, how do you do that?
Well, you know what, JW, people ask me that, like, do you sleep? Do you, what's up?
No one's ever asked me that, by the way.
Yeah, right. Do you sleep? Well, I don't know, JW. I think it's more kind of feel of a passion, a purpose. Because I actually found something that I like doing. It included everything international, just different things that were happening on a daily basis. My day was never the same. And I think I enjoy the excitement and pressure even, of putting something together and finally seeing the outcome and people loving it. It was, my form of a Instagram back in the day where people like, things, but ratings, things like that. But, and that's where I actually met my husband working at the same company or my future husband anyway. And so it made things funner, right? And there's that. But, again, when growing up, it's all about the background that I had growing up of it's what you put into it that you get out of it, right? Serving your community that served you. It's all about that sort of yin and yang of giving back. You know, you always have to give back because you have so much. And so that's always kind of, my mom was always she was such a wise person and she's really my compass. And she would say, it's, if you, how'd it go? Something like, no, I can't. I'm under pressure. I can't remember. But
it's like, Mom, come back to me.
I know, right? Give it to me now, Mom. But she would say, if you're blessed to bless others, then, it's good to share your blessings because they will come back tenfold. And I can't stress that enough. It's so true. Paying things forward, seeing your blessings be blessings for others. And I think that's
Thank you, Mom, for that, right?
Yeah, hopefully. And little nuggets like that are back in my mind and head that drive me, are kind of my compass.
How have your blessings changed over time?
I don't know, from nothing to, they've come and gone, actually, so you can't never be thankful, right? Just gratitude for living, and, there was a time when, especially, so when Barry and I finally did get married, we ended up leaving that company and wanting to do something on our own. But, trial and error, right?
Sure.
There's certain things that you try and you're like, not going to work. I mean, we actually filed bankruptcy at one point because it was just a lot, and, but then you bounce back, right? And it's how you kind of look at life and look at these failures, if you will, and whether you dwell in it and stay in the swill or move on and do something different and better. And, and it could take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but it happens.
So I hope all of you are catching on to this because there's so many good things that you're sharing with us. And so I want to highlight a couple of these just real quick for any of you listening. I hope that you're watching, by the way. If you're just listening to this in the car or during your workout, go back and watch because you're going to see the expression that comes along, Adelaida, from what you've been sharing with us. And so there's a few things that I want to re-highlight for people, which is one, never not be thankful, right? Never not be thankful. Let your blessings bless others. Even just how you went after something that you discovered something you like and enjoy, and that helped you be successful in it. So often, especially I think we do this a lot with kind of our junior high and high school kids. And if we're honest with one another and maybe what happens in our education system is we try to direct kids in ways that we think it's going to allow them to make the kind of money that they want to make, rather than asking them, like, let's kind of discover who you are. Let's kind of discover what your strengths are. Let's kind of discover what gets you. If we grab those characteristics out, maybe that leads you in a different direction, even if it's not the initial childhood dream that you thought it would be.
Right.
But there's probably something about that childhood dream that helps you discover, oh, I like the challenge. I like the change of my day. I like, being around other people. I like knowing that this is something that is exposing the world to new things, and so for you, those were the things that excite you. But for anyone, you can, like, even if you just have a moment right now, go just think, like, what are 5 things that just bring you joy? And are you getting to pursue that on a daily basis? And if the answer is no, then decide, do I want to make a change in that? And so we can jump back in now, but I want to make sure that all of you listening or watching, come back and watch this, grab these nuggets, and then apply them in your own life. And so, Adelaida, from there, you mentioned, so you guys even had a point where things were really challenging. I mean, filing bankruptcy means that things have gotten super tough. Was that a moment where, did Barry question, like, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Like, are we going to be able to continue that? I mean, Well,
I'll tell you why
from there?
Because, so Barry, and, he's deceased now. I lost him in April. And so we had a great life, right? And at that time, he was traveling so much. Like, he would be gone, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months at a time, because at that time we were kind of covering high conflict areas. So we would never know if he could come back or not. There was a point where he was in Sarajevo. There's a high conflict going there. And I got the call, that, hey, I'm like, oh God, he's dead, whatever. But then it was just the producer saying, just want to let you know, our building got bombed. He's fine, but, he's going to be on TV and he's going to look a little bloody. So that might, what I mean? Things like that. I might have mentioned or maybe told you about when he got kidnapped in Iraq and that. So you would think somebody like that would be like, oh man, I'm never doing this again. But oh, not Barry. He just kept going.
Right.
so
he's like, that's not going to stop me.
Yeah, but then
my building got bombed and I've been kidnapped. But you know what? Let's do it anyway.
Let's keep going. But then at a certain point, you're like, well, we should have kids, at some point, and that's going to require you to be home more. And so you start thinking about things. And one of the things we did was we went to one of those franchise convention conferences.
Okay, where they expose you to a bunch of different franchises.
Yeah. Okay, and we had some monies. We're like, okay, what's going to survive, in inflation, whatever. And so I decided, don't laugh, to do a Fantastic Sam's hair salon. I know nothing about hair.
You just told me I'm not allowed to laugh. How am I not supposed to laugh
if I'm laughing?
And by the way, if you own a Fantastic Sam's, that's not why
exactly. Don't
we're laughing. It's Adelaida. It's knowing you and knowing Barry, realizing
such a departure.
It just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't fit you two.
No,
that's why we're laughing.
And I don't have, like a licensed or hair, whatever. But it was something that we thought is a need. The problem was, there was no Fantastic Sam's franchises here in Arizona. So, the budget for marketing was not at where it should have been. And, so we were kind of like struggling and like, why are we doing this again?
Wait, so you guys actually went with this?
We did. We did. We had one.
This is what led up to the bankruptcy?
Totally.
Or this?
Yeah. Because we're so different, right? And
see, we obviously need to do pancakes and old fashions more often. Because I didn't even know this. I didn't know that you actually went for that.
We did.
Okay.
And it lasted for a while. I had my first son, and it was like, okay, he's home more and all this. And we're like, man, this is not us at all. And so that's what happened. And we're like, stick with what we know.
So by the way, it's okay to change direction from time to time. And when you realize maybe you've gone a direction that isn't right for you, it's okay to make another direction change.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. And I think through that, it brought us closer. It just gave us a new perspective on life. It kind of showed us that, okay, can't do that anymore. We'll try something else. But it was a departure, full on departure, but it was something we tried.
Yeah.
Okay. It didn't work. Well, move on. Right.
Yep.
And so, that was a nugget. I don't think a lot of people know, but I just shared that. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I actually, and I mean this with great sincerity, I appreciate you sharing that because there again, it's a piece of the story that maybe a lot of people wouldn't know. And especially maybe people that know you now maybe would not even guess that you've been through something like that or that you guys made a decision like that or you're like, okay, well, let's just go find something, But what I want to highlight though is going back to what you enjoy. So this one doesn't work out. It obviously is not a fit for you guys. You realize that. Yeah. Is that when Bushtex kind of gets its inception then? Or
yeah. So then it was sort of, I guess I didn't talk about my schooling because there was a time where I was like, okay, I got to step back from everything and pursue a master's or something, which I started. And then I ended up, President Laticour, bless his heart, he hired me to be his special events person, which was amazing. So that gave me another look at Arizona, getting to know Arizona better, because who better to learn it from than just such an iconic man like, Laticour.
Fantastic.
And so I just got introduced to a lot of people then, and it just went from there to then getting my doctorate. In the meantime, I'm getting pregnant, I have a kid, and then when I was ABD, which is all but dissertation, I was getting ready to give birth to twins. I was writing the Ph.D. Dissertation, and then I'm thinking I need to jump ship from working because we got to figure something out because I want to be home with the kids. I already had my oldest, Lars, who was 3 years old at the time. And so again, another iteration of what is this?
Did you all catch this? You just walked through that like it was no big deal. You have a 3-year-old. You're pregnant with twins. You're pursuing your doctorate. And in the middle of writing your dissertation, and you just walked through that whole thing like it was not a big deal. That's a big deal. You truly are amazing.
Well, thank you. But
okay, so next step after that.
Next step is then, and you'll laugh because then Barry and I are like, okay, we got to figure this out. So in full Adelaida sort of organization form. And Barry's never really worked, in an organization. He's always kind of been rogue and done things on his own.
I believe that.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to go to the library. So I got a room over at the Southwest.
I hope everybody listening knows what a library is.
I know, right? No, seriously.
You used to have to go to this place called a library in order to get your information in your books.
Yes, yeah. I know. Right. And so
crazy concept.
Totally crazy. But I wanted to be away from the kids, just us. We got a room. I had Post-it notes and those big butcher paper posted papers. And I was like, all right, we're just going to go for it. We got to figure out, green for money, blue for health. I mean, it was just like personal stuff. And we, Barry's like, what are we doing? And I'm like, we're just going to write down some of our goals and what we want to do. And
I'm imagining Barry's face at this moment, because rogue is a great word to use for him. So I can only imagine him just sitting there going,
what the heck?
What are we doing?
Right. Like, and just to kind of give context to, he's like this hunter, you know what I mean? Just sort of like, he's a guy's guy. Totally, right? So he's sitting here going, I don't have a clue.
You want me to sit in the library and do what?
But I'll tell you what, he had so much fun doing it.
Did
he? Yeah, once he started going for it, he's like, oh yeah, and then there's this and this, and so of course I take all the information, I type it up, and I'm like, look, these are your goals and aspirations, these are mine, here's where we kind of connect. And that was another exercise. So we decided then, okay, let's just really kind of focus on Bushtex and really jump, and do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when it started.
So catch this, because here, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, I don't own a multi-million-dollar company. I may never own a multi-million-dollar company. And you're thinking, well, what do I do? Like, what do I do now that maybe allows me to experience some success or some achievements that I really want in my own life? And Adelaida, you literally just laid out a starting game plan for someone to say, really think about, like, in these different areas of your life, what do you want? What do you want to go after financially? What do you want to go after health-wise? What do you want to go after relationship-wise? What do you want to go after spiritually? What do you want to go after career? Like, what do you enjoy doing? Really kind of evaluate, like, what are the things that you want in life? And in your case, you made that very clear. You and Barry made that clear of saying, we're going to put it up. We're going to visually write this stuff down, put it on a board or on a butcher paper. We're going to see where we overlap. We're going to see where it's different for us. So for any of you, like, this is your game plan of starting. And even if you've been a significant portion of life and you're just at this point in life where you're going, what's next for me? What does it look like? Like, I'm at this point where I can make some changes, or I want to make some changes, or it's not quite turning out the way that I originally imagined. What do I do? Boom. This is what you do.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't determine success. Like, that alone is not going to make you successful. But it starts to clear your head. It starts to give your mind and your subconscious a direction to go, to start taking some steps. And does that turn into a multi-million-dollar business? Maybe. Maybe for you, it turns into the family you've always been wanting and hoping for. Maybe it turns into X, right? But this is where I think this is the right point in our conversation for you to share your F words. Because these are valuable. So if you're not at a spot, if you're in your car right now, you need to pull over. Just pull over, get ready to write some things down. If you're in the middle of your workout, pause your workout and get a way that you can put these in your phone, because I want this really does become a framework. And for you, it's helped your decision making. It's helped your actions. It's helped where your life has gone. It's helped you navigate some very difficult things in your life. And it's also helped you navigate the successes and remain in that state of humility and gratitude. And so, all right, give us your F words.
Well, so let me preface this, because I'm like, people are like, what F words and why? But in the industry that I'm in, there are a lot of F bombs that get flown around,
actual F bombs.
Actual F bombs. Yeah. True, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, when you think of the F word, it could be a verb, a noun, a happy thing, a sad thing.
It can be a name sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And so I was thinking about the word, and I'm like, how can I turn this into something positive and something for me to have a framework of life? Because I can't be just dropping F-bombs and thinking life is going to be better. So yeah, I mean, I have several, but my top four are, first of all, my faith. right? And faith can be anything from believing in a higher power to, having faith in yourself and faith in others. Because I'm used to be such a control freak, right? I'm a planner. I want everything to happen. And then when things out of my control happen, I can't do anything about it. Then it's frustrating. But then I have to realize that it's out of my control. There's somebody I could lift it up to and a higher power, however you want to look at it, and just kind of breathe.
Yeah.
But then also as a leader, as an employer, needing to have faith in yourself that you could lead and run a company and do what you want to do, stick to it so that other people can have faith in you, but that you have faith in others as well, your employees. You've got to be able to have faith in being able to know that they can pull it off and not be a micromanager, because I think it empowers them as well, right?
It does.
So then my second one is family. I've talked about family a lot, and it's really, whether you have, immediate family, some people don't have, moms and dads in the traditional sense, or siblings, but maybe find your tribe. You might find a bunch of guy friends or girlfriends that you can really bounce things off of and know that they support you and lift you up the same way you can do it to them. And those are the people that are there to support you when you need it, with that you can just be easy with, and just really kind of blow off steam with, whatever it is. But it's important to have that structure. Super important. And also for me, my family always comes first, right? And I think that was a struggle I also had working, because it's like I was having this family and all of a sudden I would have to go travel, and how do I take care of my kids and, all of that stuff, but managed. The third one, which I mentioned earlier, is failure. Gotta have failure. I'm not encouraging people to fail, but it's okay to fail. Like I said, in my household, it was not an option. But almost when I did fail, and when you do fail, remember that feeling that you had, whether it's being blown a test, that you studied so hard for, and then you thought you were getting an A and it's an F, and you're like, man, I tried so hard for that. Or losing a game, or whatever it is, going through bankruptcy, that's huge. So whatever failure looks like to you, know that life goes on. It's a blip in the life of you. It's going to feel horrible, awful, but it's your character and how you come out of it that really makes you. And I think, when that happens, that's really kind of a make or break.
Oh yeah. Those lessons can be so good. So painful, but so good.
I know. Yeah. And then, I don't know what my fourth one is. I know you've mentioned fortitude to me a lot. Yeah.
That's a word that you and I both, just cherish. Because fortitude is one of those things that, when you see it in someone, you recognize it. It shows up in their life, or it doesn't. And so I don't know if that's the fourth one you were going to highlight, but I know that's one that you and I have talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the strength that comes from within, right? I mean, you could just be having the worst day, and things could be whatever, relationships could be bad, things in your life. But again, just forging forward. I do have one more. It's not really an F word,
Let's hear it.
But phonetically, but it's philanthropy, right? Giving of yourself, your time, your talent, it doesn't always have to be money and donating. It could be your time. It could be giving of your expertise, or just mentoring, and really kind of giving of yourself, because there's a bigger world beyond you.
Oh, there so is.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it also kind of gives you a pulse of what's going around, you. It could be a passion that you are so passionate about, but it doesn't really tap your everyday work life or whatever. But it's really important, I think, to have a sense of philanthropy in your life, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So
faith, family, failure, fortitude, and philanthropy.
Yeah.
See why I wanted all of you to get to a spot where you could write these down? I'll use another F word. That's fuel. That is fuel for such an outstanding life. And there's going to be day-to-day things that come up, right?
So you got to have fun, another F word.
That's
fun.
right, yeah. Let's hope so, right?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. This has been so cool.
Yeah.
This has been so cool to just be able to have a chance to visit with you. I'm going to ask you a couple of other questions. And here's the thing is I'm going to kind of frame you in a certain light, just for the benefit of like our listeners and the people that are really engaged in this conversation. Because again, I want them to be able to connect with you. And the reality is, from a financial standpoint, you've done very well. You've worked for it, but you've done very well. You've from a philanthropy standpoint, you've been a part of 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure, sometimes in some cases 10-figure philanthropic efforts that you've been a part of in a number of different ways, whether it's through your own personal financial giving, whether it's through leading campaigns, whether it's through, connecting organizations to other people that have means to give. You've just been a part of some really impactful pursuits. And so what I want to ask, one of the final two questions I want to ask, the first one is money specific. Like, you've had different phases of life that you've gone through. We got to hear about your childhood. We got to hear about, a career that just wasn't fulfilling you. We got to hear about starting a family and creating a family and then having a business that didn't work out and finding another one that you guys ultimately have made extremely successful. But if I just plainly asked, like, with where you're at in life now, and I'm guessing this has probably changed over time, but where you're at now, if I just asked you, what's important about money to you, what would you say?
It's good to have. No, I know this is going to sound kind of, what's the word? But money is a tool, right? But it's also there to kind of help the world go around.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, off the cuff, because I think people might say, gosh, yeah, Adelaida, she's so successful, whatever. Some might even say, oh, she, overnight sensation or whatever. Mm. There's never that overnight. That overnight was maybe 10 years. You know what I mean?
It's usually like a 10-year overnight success or a 20-year overnight success, or even like where we live, it's more like a 30-year overnight success.
Right. And so it takes grit, right, and stuff. But for me, a lot of people like to save money. A lot of people like to, but you only live once. Mm-hmm. So if you have the chance to spend your money in a way that is meaningful to you, that to me is wealth.
Yeah.
And being comfortable doing it and being able to share, being able to, do the things that you want to do. So I think I shared with you, I just came back from a pretty intense, cool trip, 8 country, the private jet. I mean, I'm like super ruined right now. That is not a trip that I would have even dreamed of taking, right? It was something that, because this year was a milestone birthday for both Barry and I, actually, and he was, if he was alive, he would have gone with. I honestly thought of not taking it, but a dear friend said, why? You've earned it. You deserve it. You worked for it. Do it. Mm-hmm. It's probably the best thing I've ever done. And whether I'll do another one, I don't know. But you know what I mean? It was something that really kind of, I was able to unplug. I said to my staff, don't call me if there's an emergency, call 911. Yeah. No, but I mean, and it was nice to be able to know that I've got the right people on the bus to be able to carry on without me, right? Sadly, but it's kind of one of those things where you got to trust. So, so to me, wealth, people might be like, yeah, cars, planes and trains and houses. Okay, so you have all of that, but do you have people to share it with? Do you actually spend time using it? Is it something that gives you great joy? And if it is, then great, But for me, at this time of my life, wealth is just living, being above ground, and being healthy, but being able to share, the fruits of my labor, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
You mentioned you've obviously recently had a significant life change with Barry going on to heaven and a grandson as well. Yes. And so maybe, and I don't know if there's going to be a response to this, but would you say, or if there has been, how has any of your perception of things maybe changed or been altered with some of the events that you've had over this last year?
Man, I mean, talk about life, life changing, life perceptions changing. So yes, I became a grandma.
I love that.
And then 2 weeks later, a widow. 2 weeks after that, my twins graduated from college. I mean, it's just sort of this roller coaster of emotions, of joy, elation, sadness. So when I finally was able to have the chance to process it all, I had to kind of think to myself, and it sounds cliche, but things happen for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. And the little grandchild that I have might be sort of, bury spirits in him, you know what I mean? God forbid he's reincarnated. No, but it's cool, right? And so you look at all these things and you feel blessed. And that's the only way that you can get through is just to be thankful. Not that I'm happy that Barry passed, but he was, struggling with this cancer toward the end. And so to see somebody that you love struggle with breathing, and then I think in the end, finally having peace from that. Mm-hmm. So being thankful for that, if you will, right? Yeah. And so a lot of stuff has been happening, in my life and in general, and it gives you different perspectives of your friendships, your relationships, how many people are really your friends, how many people you can let go in your life because it's just too much noise, or, just kind of all those types of things, and just keeping people in your life that you want to keep because they lift you up, they support you, they're there when you need them. So I don't know if that answered your question, this
is so good. I hope all of you have made it all the way to this point in our conversation, and go back, watch again, listen again, catch new nuggets, like watching a movie a second or third time, because Adelaida, you've shared so many fantastic things with us, and I greatly appreciate you as a person. I love you as a person. We have gotten to share just a phenomenal friendship, and I'm glad that we've been able to share one of these conversations with people around the world that are going to be inspired by you and through you. Even the way that you talked about wealth, you transitioned that question from money to wealth and what wealth really looks like, what abundance really looks like. And so thank you. Thank you for such just a fun conversation, an impactful conversational, an inspirational conversation. And thank you for all the ways that you contribute into so many people's lives. And I'm thankful to get to be one of them. And I know all of you listening now are thankful to be a part of that group that can say that you've been inspired by Adelaida. And so with that, thank you. And just continue to remember there's always more to life than money.
Come back for our next episode of the More to Life Than Money podcast. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity.